What does it mean to be a servant leader? One of the simplest but least productive advice you can hear is, why don't you just try to be humble? Anyone who realizes what it takes to be a good leader will realize that you need to be humble to lead others. But ultimately, what does that mean? The way that I've recently discovered this and connected a couple dots is through the story of Joshua. Joshua was chosen by Moses, or really chosen by God, to follow Moses as the leader of the Israelites, taking them from the land of Canaan, or from the desert into the promised land. It's unique how Joshua was chosen because he was not someone who had a claim to be a leader through his blood. He wasn't related to Moses through some sort of campaign or any type of democratic system or process. But he was actually chosen by God. And it was on Moses' intercession with God and pleading him of who should lead this people next that Joshua was chosen. And it's very interesting that in the way that Joshua was bestowed this leadership mirrors how the priests today are given their leadership as shepherds. And that they said, the Lord told Moses, "Take thee Joshua, the son of Nun, a man who is in the Spirit, and lay thine hand upon him." Now it's interesting that when a priest, or seminary, or deacon becomes a priest, it is the bishop who lays his hand upon that man to make him a priest. And this ultimately shows his real duty and his real duty and role is to be one who is to sacrifice, who is to give everything in mediation, to give everything as a sacrifice for others. And so from there, Joshua led the Israelites into the promised land. He's the one that first took the Israelites from the desert, crossing the Jordan, to the promised land, the land of Canaan that had been told to the people in the covenant that this would be their land, that God had set it aside for them. And it's interesting that when you compare with Moses and Solomon and Caleb, for their reward, let's say, for their faithfulness to the covenant, for their faithfulness and to God's commands, is they were blessed with a family, with kids, and with land. But Joshua is not afforded any of these blessings. And it is actually most interesting that Joshua is the one to get the last pick of land in all of Canaan. And of the original Israelites who were faithful to God's command, besides Moses, amongst the spies who each were a part of the 12 tribes of Israel, Joshua and Caleb are the two that remain faithful and believe in the Lord's promise that they would be able to conquer the kingdoms and the empires that were already there in the promised land. And so then when Caleb comes back to Joshua after they've made their way through conquering most of the land, he says, "Hey, I've been faithful. It was 40 years ago that Moses told me that I would get the land for myself, for my wife, for my kids, and that we would build something to go on forever." And Joshua justly gives this to Caleb, but there's no mention in the Bible that Joshua picks out a land for himself. And actually, when they finally get settled, and Joshua is the one who decides and divides up all the land in the book of Joshua, and it says, when they had made an end of dividing the land for inheritance in their coasts, the children of Israel gave an inheritance to Joshua, the son of Nun, among them. Now this is interesting that Joshua then, the leader, and arguably the most closest to God and of the highest holiness, he's the one that gets the last pick. He gets arguably the worst plot of land. And this is a very fitting typological connection to Christ, because it is through Christ making himself poor that he allows us to be rich. It's through Joshua choosing to take the last steps to take the last choice that he gives to his people. He gives of himself completely in withholding nothing back so that others, instead of himself, may have the best portion. And this is very fitting to also connect to one of Jesus' quotes in the New Testament where he says, "The last will be first and the first will be last." Now this really drew a connection to me based on my high school experience playing soccer, where our team did a little case study looking at the All Blacks. A book by James Kerr here called Legacy describes how this author was looking for what it takes to be excellent in an organization. And it's primarily built around the culture. And what he ended up finding was this All Blacks team across decades and with a variety of different coaches, a variety of different players, even a variety of different playing systems have always been successful. So what does it take to create such success, such that withstands any single individual and any single coach, but just as a sustained period of excellence? And one of their main principles, the foundation of their whole program and their whole culture, comes down to sweeping the shed. And now this practice, although it is more of a mentality, is most easily seen or manifested in how the senior players, the captains, the ones who have the most experience, the biggest respect, the most notoriety often, they are the ones that are responsible for cleaning up the shed and literally sweeping up the dirt and cleaning it up for everyone else. And this displays and demonstrates and practices a real virtue of discipline and humility. And it shows how no matter who you are, no matter how successful you are, no matter what you've accomplished, you're never too big for a single task. And it encourages the team to look after the needs of everyone else and put their own comforts last so that they can be disposed to seek what they can do for the team instead, and say, you see something that needs to be done instead of pointing to someone else, or you take it upon yourself to do it. And in our soccer team, this was the way we tried to practice this, and it was implemented and talked with the coach and team, is that it would end up becoming the seniors' responsibility to clean up all the cones, clean the pennies, shag the balls, and it would be upon them, and it would be their duty to take care of all of the little busy work details that often can get tossed aside to an underclassman. And instead of it being, oh, go have the freshman get the ball across the street, it's, we're going to have our senior All-American captain go shagging balls. And this ultimately proved very fruitful for our team. And a good spin that a coach put on it for us is that it's actually a privilege for us to go out and clean up. And that you never know when your last game will be. So you have to take advantage and see this as an opportunity to be the one that gets to clean up, because you don't know when it's going to be next. Going into the playoffs, it was almost a race to see who could get all the cones up, who could be the one to go across the street and run the extra half mile for a ball that rolled somewhere or that ended up going on the other side of the turf or the fence or whatever, because you know that you might not ever get to go shag a ball like that again. And this really proved super fruitful for our team, and individually it was something that has just really shifted in my head what it means to lead and what it first means to be a teammate. And ultimately, St. John Henry Newman, who has a really great quote in analyzing the life of Joshua and comparing it to how God has created the order of the universe and just how the order of nature is structured, that the ones who serve have the true power. It is not the one who tells people what to do, but the one who leads by example. And the exact quote goes, "We rise by falling, we conquer by suffering. We are persuaded by silence, we become rich by being generous. We inherit the earth by meekness, we earn glory by penitence and prayer. Heaven and earth shall sooner fall than this rule be reversed. It is the law of Christ's kingdom. and nothing can reverse it but sin. So I invite you guys to really think of how in your life, as a brother, as a son, as a husband, as a coworker, how are you guys doing the little things that need to be done that no one wants to do? And I fall in this myself a lot, is I want to point to someone else to do the work that I know needs to be done that I don't think is good enough for me. But really, the one who leads and does the little things, who takes care of himself in his shed, he's the one with the real power. He's the one with the real leadership. And he's the one that's most imitating Christ. God bless.